with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, mori mori wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedlie, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcasts. And be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show. Our guest today is author and storyteller Bob Hartman. He's here to celebrate Clever Cub and also helping us make connections with an audience. Before we invite Bob into the studio for what became sort of a short masterclass on the art of presenting to school audiences, I want to invite you to connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram and TikTok, at Jedlie Magic on Twitter. We also have a great YouTube page, Reading With Your Kids. And, of course, we would love for you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please be sure to sign up for our free online magazine. And also, you can use the contact button at the top of the page to let us know what we're doing well, let us know what we could be doing better, and let us know who you would like to hear on a future episode of the Reading With Your Kids podcast. Join us right now from the United Kingdom. Our guest is returning to the show today to celebrate two great new children's books. They're called Clever Cub Learns to Trust God and Clever Cub Learns to Share. Please welcome back to the show, Bob Hartman. Hey, Bob, good to see you again. How are you?
And you, and I'm great. Thank you very much.
Excited to have you on. Bob and I were just talking about the beauty of the fall season and how especially here in the northeast of the United States, it's just it's like a masterpiece of color and beauty that surrounds us.
Yeah, we have some of the colors over here. They're not quite as strong as I remember from back home in Pittsburgh, but still, it's a really nice time of the year here as well.
Yeah, so tell us all about. Let's start with Clever Cub Learns to Share. I'm really happy that I just learned how to say Clever Cub and not Clever Cub.
I do the same thing. Clever Club, no Clever Cub.
I know. It's so learning to share, that is something that I think a lot of parents assume that kids will know like instinctually, but they don't.
No. I'm not sure that's how we're made instinctually. I think we like what we've got and like to hang on to it. So, yeah, I think that's something that we do have to be taught.
Yeah. And so what are the things that Clever Cub goes through that helps him learn how to share it and things that we can talk to our kids about?
Oh, he doesn't want to share a pine cone, which, I mean, what kind of toys the Clever Cubs have? Not much. Right. But he's got this pine cone, and he's afraid that his friend is going to, like, borrow it and break it and drop it, that kind of thing. He doesn't really want to let go, but that's the whole point. So he basically learns about the story of the feeding of the 5,000 and how, because the little boy shared his lunch, it turned out to be good for everybody, the little boy as well as all the people that got to eat.
Yeah. This is interesting, and I hope you don't mind us going down this road. You were referencing the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000 at the end of one of his teachings. The folks had gathered there, and I believe the Bible said there were 5,000 men. And our pastor at one time said, so that meant some of them brought their kids and their wives, so maybe there was 15 or 20,000. We don't know. They're just kind of the odds. And my pastor at the time asked an interesting question because I think the Bible's unclear. The Bible says Jesus said the blessing and he said distribute the food. It doesn't say he made the blessing and suddenly there was a mountain of food. You just said, say the blessing and share. And my pastor at one time said, what would be the bigger miracle, that Jesus actually multiplied those loaves and created this big truck full of food, or that Jesus' words inspired people who had food to share it with others, so that, and they were so generous, at the end of the meal, 12 baskets full of food came back. What do you think? I mean, I thought that was an interesting question, and I just love the idea that, as someone who does magic for a living, I thought the idea of, hey, the real magic being inspiring people to share, that to me was the bigger miracle.
Well, I mean, I think they're both miracles in a sense. I mean, I think in the traditional sense of a miracle, Jesus actually breaking the small amount of bread and multiplying it to the point where everybody had enough to eat, I think probably is a miracle, and it's probably why it went into all four of the Gospels. I mean, it's one of the few miracles that actually finds its way into all four. And I think there has to be a significant reason for that. But yeah, the fact that what Jesus does has, I think, through the ages inspired other people to share is also a wonderful thing as well. So I prefer to kind of stick to the, a little bit of bread and fish gets multiplied miraculously into loads of bread and fish. But then that act, particularly the act of the little boy, inspiring other people to share from that point on.
Yeah. It's interesting. The pastor that replaced the one that I spoke of was very emphatic that it was history.
There you go. There you go.
Just take that eraser out and erase that out.
That's right. He edited the previous pastor's sermon.
Yes, there you go.
Yes.
But, I think it brings up something that I think is important for us as parents to be able to do, is to encourage our kids to question what it is that we learn. When we learn about Jesus or any religion, I think it is really healthy and really necessary for us to encourage our kids to question, to answer those questions, and to be honest, and especially be honest when you say, I don't know. That's like a mystery.
Well, that's the thing. There are so many things that happen in the Bible, particularly from a miraculous point of view, that sometimes seem almost impossible to believe. But as I say, I think the reason that they're there and the reason that they've continued to be passed on from generation to generation is that something quite unusual happened that doesn't usually happen. I mean, if things like that usually happen, we'd call them ordinaries and not miracles, wouldn't we? Because, that always happens. I think, the fact that Jesus comes as, God on earth to make a difference carries with it a certain kind of weight and maybe even a kind of an expectation that, if God comes to earth, he's going to do some quite incredible things.
Yeah. Before we move on to the other book, if a family's out there listening and they turn this on and they've listened this far and they go, yeah, but I'm Muslim, I'm Buddhist, I'm Hindu, we don't have any faith at all. Is Clever Cub going to have any place in our family library?
Well, it might. I mean, the thing is that we often learn from not only our own religious traditions, but from other people's religious traditions, don't we? I mean, just because I'm a Christian doesn't mean that I don't read stories from other faiths or talk to people from other faiths and have the opportunity to learn about how they see the world from their own experience. And so I suppose I would say to somebody who's listening and had no faith or some other faith, well, we can all learn from each other. And so there's a potential there, I think, for our children to learn as well. And particularly with a story like this, which is about what I hope is that kind of common human desire, to not be selfish and to share with other people, that would open up that door as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it is something that our kids really need to work on, that idea of sharing, even with siblings and certainly with friends and with kids that they're just meeting for the first time. It's a vital skill to learn, because you really can't do a lot in this world as an adult unless you learn how to cooperate and share.
Oh, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's not just kids who need to learn it, is it? I mean, I think we all need reminding that the world's a far better place when we actually hold the things we have loosely and are willing to give them and to share them with other people. Yeah. It makes a little difference.
Yeah. I think that's something we were reminded of in a big way during the pandemic. Just this idea, it was a struggle on everybody, but there are some people that were especially hard hit. You know, the people who had to wait in line for hours for food and whatnot. And I hope that it's many people responded and helped out folks who were especially hard hit during the pandemic. I hope that lesson, that we remember that lesson as we move forward and move past, fingers crossed, past COVID.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's certainly is something we need over here. I mean, I don't know what it's like in the States at the moment, but in the UK, food poverty is quite.
I thought Putin was invading the UK suddenly.
No, he's a problem too. But food poverty is a huge problem here, and so in every supermarket we have little containers, that are set up for you to buy, a few extra things and put them in there, and hopefully make a difference with the different food banks, around the country. And there's loads of them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's a problem that persists.
What a great way to teach our kids to share. In addition to reading Clever Cub Learns to Share, but when we go to our supermarket, remembering that, hey, every moment is a teachable moment. And, picking up, if you're buying 3 or 4 cans of soup, add 2 or 3 more, and at the end of the shopping trip, ask your kid to bring it up and put it into those gift containers, gift collection boxes.
Yeah, it's a terrific way to do that. And as a matter of fact, even asking your children to help you decide which sort of products to pick, and then specially to kind of put in the containers is a really good thing. I mean, we've got one at church as well. So, it's constantly there, and people are always bringing stuff as well. So there's another opportunity.
Yeah. The other book that's recently released in the series is Clever Cub Learns to Trust God. I have a feeling that this is a really powerful book for kids, but I'm guessing, too, it could be a powerful reminder for a lot of adults.
Oh, yeah. Again, as you say, coming out the back end of the pandemic, I'm sure there were lots of questions in people's minds about sort of where God was and, could we trust him? And, where is he in the midst of all of this kind of thing? So, yeah, I think it's important for kids as well as adults.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about this story.
Oh, this one's based on the story of the spies in Canaan. And it's all about helping. Clever Cub's worried about his friends, and he struggles to get sleep at night because what if such and such happens to one friend, or such and such happens to another friend, and he worries. So basically, his folks tell him the story of the spies in Canaan, where they obviously went into the promised land, and they noticed that it was going to be a very difficult job, to move into the promised land, because people were so big and the walls were so tall, and what was going to happen, and were they going to be okay? And then there's that whole question of, well, the 10 spies saying, well, we can't possibly do it, we're going to have to stay here, and the other 2 saying, well, no, God's brought us this far, we can trust him to bring us even further. And I think that's true for all our lives, isn't it? God's brought us this far. God has helped me through this situation or that situation. Can I find the faith to trust him to take me that next step?
Yeah, and that is hard for a lot of us at different times to trust God. I think it's important to kind of look back and say, well, God brought me here, and right now, this one thing in my life is really hard. It's really challenging, but there's been so many other really wonderful things that God has brought to my life, and so why shouldn't I take another chance on him?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the advantage of experience, and in some respects, the kind of thing that a parent or a grandparent has the opportunity to share it with a child that, that long breadth of experience that says, yeah, I'm older and these things have happened to me and you might not have faced them yet, but I got through it and, I trusted God to do it and it made a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Where I should just ask this. A lot of times people are like, oh, but Pastor, you have this great faith, and it's easy for you to believe in God, and there must never be a moment in your life where you question God, where your faith is never shaken. I have a feeling that's not true. That you've experienced the same kind of challenges in faith that we all do.
We have all been through difficult times, and we've all faced situations where we said to ourselves, have I gone the right way here? I don't mean questions of like goodness and badness, that sort of thing, but in terms of my life and the direction that it's taken, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And those crossroads where you think, well, I really don't know, and God help me, and I just need some direction for this next step. I think that's true for all of us.
Yeah. Is there anything that you do during those moments of doubt that helps strengthen your faith, or gives you the courage to act as if you have the faith that was strong yesterday and believe it's going to come back?
Yeah, well, I think partly it is, as you said before, reflecting back on times when God has been there with you. But I think, and prayer is an important part of it as well. I think stopping, and this happens a lot, stopping and saying, hang on a minute, have you prayed about this? Or are you just sort of assuming that you're going to kind of fly your way through it? Have you specifically asked for help and for direction? That makes a big difference. It really does.
Yeah.
Because it grounds you, puts you in the right space with regard to God. And then I suppose just believing that even if you're going the wrong way, okay, if you cross the wrong step, God is still there, Mm-hmm. He's not gonna like abandon you. I've had several occasions during the course of my life where the question is, do I carry on? Do I go back like into settled ministry again, which is kind of what I was trained for, etc., or do I do trust that this whole writing thing and storytelling thing, is kind of the way forward? And I've gone one way sometimes and another way other times, because that's just the way life is, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But in both cases, it's kind of been like, okay, well, on the basis of what information I have, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trusting God with it. And hey, even if it's the wrong step, He's still there. He hasn't just left me behind mm-hmm. and said, sorry, you went that way, I'm going the other way. That doesn't happen. He goes with you then as well, even if, maybe you haven't gone exactly the right way.
Right. Yeah. I love that you mention prayer and asking God. There was a moment in my life, I think I shared it on the podcast, where as a young guy in my 20s, I thought I was being called to be a Catholic priest, and went on a retreat with 25 other men who were considering. And the first thing the priest running the retreat said to me was, have you asked God if He wants you to be a priest? And I thought, no, I haven't. And I did that night, and I didn't like the answer I got because it was no. And but it was as scary as it was, and as heartbreaking and as angering as it was. I thankfully had the sense to wait a couple of days and go back to prayer and say, all right, so you don't want me to do that, so what do you want me to do? And he gave me a very clear answer. It kind of surprised me because it was go to clown college auditions, but it worked out really great.
God makes great use of clowns.
Yes.
He does. I mean, traditionally, that's a very good place to be.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. So, yes, and I'm really, I'm really thankful that at that point in my life, I did trust in God, and I did have the sense to ask, and I hope I continue to have that sense as I approach 100 years of age, and I think it's something that hopefully I've passed on to my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. But it frees you up, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And it frees them up.
Yeah.
Because it saves us from that set of expectations that either somebody else has drummed into us or maybe we've drummed into ourselves. And it sets us free to truly say to God, look, whatever. What do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And I think in that freedom, comes, I think it comes the adventure that he wants to bring to our lives.
Yeah. That's a great point. The adventure that God wants to bring to our lives. Because I got to tell you, he's brought a lot of adventure to my life. I've been to places as a clown and as a magician that I never would have went to in a million years.
Yep, same here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not as a pastor, but storyteller and writer, and these very, very interesting doors opened, and it's like, wow, how'd that happen?
Yeah.
But it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is cool. Hey, tell us just real quick a little bit about the storytelling. So do you travel around the UK telling stories at churches and events and things? Yeah.
Churches, conferences. As a matter of fact, I'm off to Rugby tomorrow to for a conference that used to be a puppet festival run by an organization called One Way UK. It used to be focused primarily on puppetry, but they've expanded it. So there will be a magician there, storytellers, balloon artists, people with all different kinds of skills. So I'm going up there to do a bit of teaching for people who want to come along for that. But I also visit churches and just tell stories there, and schools as well, because in the UK, since we have a state church, you're allowed to tell Bible stories in schools.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, it's required in most schools.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating.
That they have some kind of an assembly.
Yeah. Hey, I know we have a lot of authors out there who listen, and they all have a dream of going in and doing school presentations. And a lot of them have, being very honest, a lot of them have a dream of being paid huge amounts of money to go to schools. And so first, erase that from your mind. You might make a little bit, but a lot of authors go in and they think, okay, all I have to do is sit in a rocking chair and read my book. And that's going to cut it as a school assembly. And there's a lot more to it. Can you give an author out there who's looking to do that a little bit of advice how they can go from sitting in that rocking chair, reading their story, to really engaging in audiences?
Yeah, I mean that sitting in the rocking chair thing is only going to cut it if you're like the best-selling author there ever was. I mean, just because then people want to look at you and go, "Oh my word, I was in the same room with them." But otherwise, you're going to have to do something to keep your audience. Mm-hmm. And generally speaking, just sitting there for, in an hour and reading your book is probably not going to hack it unless, you're the best reader in the world. I just think you have to approach it as a kind of performance. You really do. There's the writing me that's, at home or in the coffee shop or in the farm shop, day by day. And then there's the performing me. And there is a difference, because that performing me is kind of up there and out there, and do my best to engage the audience. So I always say, number one, you got to approach it with a playful attitude. I think that playfulness is the absolute key to gaining and then keeping children's attention. I think it's true for adults as well, but certainly for kids, because they're in a school situation, and the expectation generally, certainly in schools here, is that they should be sat there quietly with their hands on their laps. They all sit in assembly halls normally on their bottoms, in rows. And so the idea is that it's meant to be quite formal. And what you do is you come in, and I think you cut against that formality. I mean, I always have these two very important storytelling rules I start with. I say, listen, kids, here are my storytelling rules. Number one, we're going to do lots of stupid things today. Okay? And they start to giggle. I'm like, but then I say, listen, here's the thing. If it gets too stupid, it might get too noisy and you won't be able to hear the rest of the story. So if it gets that way, I'll just put my hand in the air. That's my signal to get quiet and look up here. And generally speaking, what that does is it sets the tone. It says, listen, we're going to have a good time. We're going to really enjoy ourselves. But there's going to be some order to it that makes the teachers happy, certainly. But it also makes me happy because it means that I can proceed and then get them as noisy as possible and bring them back down again. So I tend to do a series of relatively short stories to kind of keep things moving. And it also gives me the opportunity to watch the audience and see what's working and what's not working, what they like, what they don't like, and to kind of build the relationship and bring them along. And that's the other thing about storytelling. It is fundamentally based on relationships. Mm-hmm. So you're there to build that relationship, and you're just not going to build it if there's kind of a wall of embarrassment or shyness or whatever between you and them. You actually have to kind of work for that intention. And as I say, I think you do it by being playful. Certainly, I think by being interactive, giving them something to do in the course of the stories. But also by just kind of keeping things bouncy and light and keeping it light on your feet.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Performance is, and I agree with you, is building a relationship with the audience. And that means that you're listening. And it means that you're not, and you're able to respond to what you hear and what you see. My daughter toured with me for many years. She would come out and go on the road with me for 3 weeks at a time, 4 weeks at a time. And recently she was helping me with a project, and there was a young intern helping us. And the intern turned to me and said, "Hey, could you send me a script so I can prepare for this?" And my daughter is on the Zoom call, and you just see her. She just puts her head down, and she starts shaking her head, laughing like this. And the intern says, what are you laughing at? And my daughter said, he has never worked with a script a minute in his life. It's just, you have these stories. So you get to the show with the box full of stories or magic tricks or whatever, and then you start in, and you just say, oh, well, they love that, so I'm going to go with this story over here, or they didn't like that story. They're probably not going to like this next one, so let me dig deeper into the box and pull out this other story for them.
Yep, you're always thinking, always working on your feet, and the trick, of course, as you know, is you're focused on X story that you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. Giving it your all, responding to them, but also in the back of your head, there's that thing that's going, okay, now next, this is what we're going to do, and we'll move over here. And learning that thing where, you're constantly anticipating, so what the next movement is it's huge fun. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember that time? I mean, I can't give it a date, but I absolutely remember the time that I first became aware of the fact that I had two brains working at the same time. I had this one brain that was doing the performance, and another brain that was like, okay, where do I have to step next, and what do I have to pick up, and what's going on? And that's the trip. It's really cool.
It is. The other thing I really enjoy, I do a lot of story building with kids. So I've got a collection of stories that I've been telling for years that are part of that sort of pocket full of stories, but also more in a classroom situation than in an assembly situation. I'll build a story with them, so I'll help them to develop characters and settings and come up with a conflict. And the great joy there is that, when you walk into that room, you have no idea what the ending is going to be because you've never built this story before, nor have they. But I think it's the closest thing that you can give them to the actual creative process that results in your creating a story. Because it genuinely is that, starting with a blank piece of paper, mm-hmm. and then moving on to something that, in the best situations is fully constructed. It doesn't always work that way, as you can imagine. It's a tightrope. But even if you fall off the rope, it doesn't matter, mm-hmm. because, you've taken them through a process and they've enjoyed it as they went along.
Yeah. And that to do that, you, as a performer, you need to be able to be vulnerable.
Oh, yeah.
And to say, I don't know where this is going. It might go off the rails really bad, but I'm going to trust that it's going to work out.
Yeah, you do. And of course, you can admit to them that even when you're sat down creating a story, sometimes you plan it out. And most of the time I plan to a certain degree, but there's always that kind of moment where you think, well, no, this is the wrong way to go. We need to go this way instead. And yeah, it could turn into a disaster, but that's the process. I mean, that's how it works. That's being honest with them. And what I've discovered, and I've had no end of teachers tell me this, is that at the end of the session, they'll point to a group of boys in the class, particularly boys, and say, you know what? Those boys never get any written creative work down. They just struggle. That's the lowest group in the class. How did you get them to do that? And essentially I say to them, it's because we did it all verbally. We did it all as a kind of play. We did it all out there, and there wasn't the pressure immediately to take what was here and run it through the fingers and into the hand. I said, that's what slows them down. They've got terrific imaginations. You just have to let them tell the story to themselves first, and then let them put it down somehow, which frankly is how any writer does it anyway.
Right. Yeah. I just hope at some point we'll wake up to the fact that these schools that we set up, they're beautiful and they've done some great things, but it's not natural. It's not the way we were meant to learn.
Well, my daughter and two of my sisters homeschool. So consequently, they have a very different view on things, as you can imagine. But it has been wonderful. I mean, we didn't homeschool our kids, but it's been wonderful to see the differences and to see how the children have developed, the grandchildren have developed as a result of a very different model.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, please tell everybody where we can go. This has been fascinating. I mean, I could talk about performing with you for forever. But where can people go to find out more about Clever Cub and all the great things that you're creating?
Well, davidccook.org is the website for the publishing company that has helped me bring Clever Cub to life. There we go. I slowed down and said it right. And as for me, I think probably I've done some YouTube videos. That's probably the best thing to do. If you just go on YouTube and just put, Bob Hartman. I think last time I said not the guitarist in Petra, but just Bob Hartman storyteller in there. They'll find stuff. I don't have a website. I'm just rubbish at social media. But yes, they can find me on YouTube if they want to see some examples.
We've had a great time speaking about the Clever Cub series, the 2 new books, Learns to Share and Learns to Trust God. And we've also had a really great time speaking about the art of storytelling with our guest, Bob Hartman. Bob, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me again.
Oh, you do not want to miss the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Rachel Ignatowski will be here to celebrate her book. It's called The History of the Computer. Rachel is an amazing woman. She's so much fun to talk to. You don't want to miss it. That's the next episode of the podcast. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Bob Hartman. Please be sure to check out Clever Cub. Also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q, Jordan Saley, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.